Hi, thanks for joining us today. Welcome to Marquis Presents Your Key to Healthy Living. My name is Karen Halloran, and I'm the Community Liaison for Marquis Health Services. Today, I have a special guest. His name is Attorney Stephen Spano, and he is an elder law attorney. So thank you for joining us on the show today.
Thank you so much for having me, Karen.
Well, it's wonderful that you had the time to come and speak with us. I have so many seniors out there asking questions. So I thought we could start first by, you could tell us a little background about yourself, how you got into practicing elder law and what your background is.
Well, I come from an interesting background. I come from an incredibly wealthy city and wealthy background, East Boston, Massachusetts. I tell that to people when I do presentations out throughout the country often, and if someone laughs, they know that East Boston is the exact opposite of wealthy. I was one of 7 children, and my mom had dementia at a relatively early age, in her late 50s. And I just loved working with seniors. I was a dual major in undergraduate in English and psychology. I worked with disabled people, we still do, and decided that these people needed representation, and I wanted to be the person that represents them. And I subsequently got a master's degree in business, a law degree. I'm a very financial attorney, and here I am.
That is fantastic. The seniors definitely need people like yourself looking out for them. And I have so many questions they ask me. I mean, first thing that comes to mind, maybe you could say, what does an estate attorney do? There's an elder law attorney, estate attorney. Are those interchangeable terms?
Well, you know, I don't win a lot of points when I say bad things about other attorneys, but there's a reason they make jokes about lawyers. You know, I don't think somebody flipped a coin and said, oh, lawyers lose. I think that there's a good reason. And we see things every day from different attorneys who say, well, I dabble in this area, or I practice there, or any attorney can do this. For example, recently we saw an irrevocable trust drafted by an attorney. That's a trust that's unrevocable, designed to protect assets that didn't protect the assets. A couple weeks ago, we saw one that they put the wrong parties in the trust, and it causes a different problem. We actually had somebody recently that came in, and their documents, the lawyer sent them all their documents and said, hey, sign here and be sure to date it this date. Well, the lawyer and the witnesses in the lawyer's office had already signed all of the documents saying that I saw the person sign. And yet they sent them to the person at home saying, would you sign them? Interestingly, they said they saw the person's driver's license as well, and this person is an adult and has never had a driver's license. And so, so I'm going to start with that. And the reason why is you can basically say you practice any area of law. There is no rule or regulation. So you can be an elder law attorney today, an estate attorney, a personal injury attorney, a workers' compensation attorney. But there are people that this is just what they do. And one of the ways you want to look at that is to look at their advertising, their website, go to their office and say, is this the kind of office an estate planning or elder law attorney would have? And if they're also having criminal clients and other people come in, it probably really isn't a specialized law practice. The other problem in Massachusetts is that lawyers are not required to obtain continuing education credits. A shock, because almost every single other profession requires it. The only reason I can think of is that many of the politicians happen to be lawyers, and why would they create a rule that makes it so that they have to get continuing education? So the other problem is, if you don't need continuing education, if it's not required, people don't get it. I'm very proud of the fact that our entire staff, including our paralegals, get hundreds of hours of continuing legal education on an annual basis. So that sometimes our paralegals will be at a conference and say, oh my God, I can't believe that lawyer asked such a simple question. Very proud that they know so much, but at the same time you have to be cautious because they're still not lawyers, as I tell people. So first of all, you want to look out and say, what does this person do? An estate attorney is frequently concerned more with issues of inheritance and the next generation, and possibly avoiding probate, while an elder law attorney is concerned with those things, but should really be focused on the needs of the senior. And if you're really looking for someone who's a specialist, there's something called board-certified elder law attorneys. Now, there are only 24 of them in the entire state of Massachusetts. I am one. And those are board-certified attorneys that have taken a full-day exam. They do have to meet annual continuing education requirements. And if you're looking for something even more of a requirement, there's something called the National Academy of Elder Law Attorneys, Council of Advanced Practitioners. There are only 3 of those in all of Massachusetts. I happen to be one of those 3. Oh. The others, one is in Worcester and one is in Springfield. And those are the attorneys who've been practicing for an extended period of time, who are peer reviewed by this national organization that does peer reviews, and have met the other qualifications that are typically board-certified elder law attorneys as well. So those people are very specialized because elder law encompasses estate planning. You know, it's like saying all geese are white.
Right.
Well, you know, all white geese happen to be geese, but not all geese happen to be white. And so all elder law attorneys do some estate planning, but not all estate planning attorneys engage in elder law. So elder law is sort of a comprehensive umbrella of which special needs planning comes in. We have a lot of disabled clients. There's elder law, there's tax issues, there's housing issues, there's employment rights issues, there's conversion. Conversion is the legal word for theft if somebody steals something from you. There are all of these types of issues to protect the individual. In many cases, there's people who don't want to, for example, end up living in a particular environment, yet they engage in behaviors that force them into the environment that they never wanted to be in the first place. You know,
Can I stop you there? What would that be?
well, a good example would be, you know, you hear all of these radio programs and other people, and they push people to set up these irrevocable trusts or unrevocable trusts. Now, the problem with those is once you transfer things into those, you do not own them anymore. Now, I understand many of your listeners, their attorneys have told them, don't worry, you have total control. Well, that's BS, because that can't be the case. If you had total control, the state would require you to cancel out that policy or that trust and utilize it for your own benefit. So you cannot have control over it. You know, the attorneys unfortunately tell people things that are not true. I am a staunch believer that many more attorneys should lose their license permanently on an annual basis than do, in my opinion. The attorneys never will acknowledge that they told the person this. They'll tell them, well, I told you that if your kids agree and the beneficiaries and this one, then you would have control. Well, of course they're not necessarily going to agree. You know, I grew up in East Boston. I went to Catholic school. I tell people we have this thing called the Lord's Prayer. It doesn't say, Our Father, lead us not into sin. It says temptation for a really good reason. And all of a sudden, the kids are inheriting all of this money. They're guaranteed to get it. And you're now asking them to give that up so you can spend it and live somewhere else. They're pretty much, I can tell you, in 50% or more of the cases, going to say no. And so people set up these trusts because they see all of this advertising, and they set these things up because the advertising is based upon fear. People say, well, you're going to lose everything to the nursing home. Right. Well, I ask people all the time, how many nursing homes do you know that have opened in the last 25 years? And I very rarely can have anybody pick a single one. I ask them, do you know how many nursing homes have closed just in the past 5 years? And they can tell me dozens of them. And the reason why is many years ago when nursing homes additionally came into being, lots of people did not have anywhere else to go. There was no home care. There were no adult day programs. There was no Meals on Wheels. There were no senior centers, senior housing. None of these things, assisted living, continuing care retirement communities, none of these things existed before. So today, there are so many other options, and you know, you can have someone come into your own house and help you. Right. And by having all of those things, what we have seen is a dramatic decline in the number of people that end up in a nursing home. And a nursing home is an appropriate location for many people because they have dementia, they're not safe by themselves, they need some extensive care, but that's a small number of people. The government and MetLife and other institutions do a number of studies and show that less than 5% of people will actually end up in a nursing home on a long-term basis. Now, many people go into a nursing home for short-term rehab, but they don't even think that they're in the nursing home. They say, I was not in the nursing home, I was in rehab. It might have been in the same room with someone who was really spending a long period of time there.
Right. That is true. That is true. Well, I'm glad you clarified some of that. That's interesting. I didn't know a lot of that. And to know of your credentials, too. You're only 3 in the state. That's pretty good.
Well, it doesn't mean that there aren't other attorneys who really care and know what they're doing. But we do. This is a formal credentialing process.
Absolutely. I was going to ask you, an elder law attorney, when does somebody come to see you? Do they come early on in their 50s, 60s, or do people wait till they're in their 70s, 80s? Or are we dealing with the sandwich generation of the adult children that are now coming because mom or dad has dementia?
Well, our firm is a very multidisciplinary, had a problem with that word for some reason, multidisciplinary law firm, and that we also work with a number of people who have young disabled children, and we also work with people who are new parents. What we recommend people do is once their children reach the age of 18, that they should have some basic estate planning documents. So that's even much earlier than you think, and here's the reason why. What you don't know is if your child goes off to college and gets hurt, you cannot make any decisions for them because they're an adult. You would have to go to court and get a guardianship to make healthcare decisions or a conservatorship to make financial decisions. Nor can you even communicate with their medical providers. But by completing some simple documents with a good qualified law firm who knows what they're doing, you could have those documents done that give you the authority. I'll give you a funny example. We had one of our staff, she had her daughter going off into college, and she wanted her daughter to sign a healthcare proxy power of attorney in this thing called a HIPAA authorization. And her daughter met with me and said, well, if I sign these, can my mom get access to my health records at the school? And I said, yes, she can. So she said, well, I want to think about this. I said, that's fine. You think about it. And she came back in a few days later and said, my mom said if I don't sign this, she's not signing my tuition check. And I said, well, and the staff person's name, Florence, I said, well, she can't hold that over your head. That's undue influence. And so I had her go out and talk with her mom again. I said, you have to make a free decision here. Your mom can't force you to make this. And she did make the decisions. People are concerned sometimes of what are you going to find out. But most parents aren't nosy. If they were nosy, they would know everything their adult children are doing now, and they don't. They don't care. If you've raised your children right, you've raised them to be an autonomous, independent, respectful human beings.
I feel like you're telling my story.
Well,
I have 3-way in college, so I think that's something I need to do and put in place.
It's really a great thing to do. Other people, they come in, they have disabled children. They're reaching the age of 18 years of age, and they've been disabled since birth, and so we have to go for a guardianship and a conservatorship for them in many cases. And the reason for that is in the old days, your doctor was your doctor for life, either their life or your life, whichever ended first, I guess. But today, doctors are mostly employees of large institutions, and they rotate around. And in the old days, a person would do everything for you. They knew you needed this guardianship, but they didn't care, and they ignored it. Today, people can't do that. There are too many laws that could hold them accountable for doing something wrong. So the physicians really want to do the right thing today. And then you have to go for this guardianship. And then the next question is, if the parents are getting older and the kids are aging, who now is going to make the decisions for the children if the parent's not there? And how do you leave money to those children? Because most of these children are on some sort of public benefits. And the health insurance that they receive through the state could be worth hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars a year. And so you don't want them to lose that. So you don't want to leave them money like in a will or a typical trust, for example. You want to set up something that protects that money. Otherwise, what will happen is they'll lose all their benefits. Some parents decide just not to leave anything to those children. I don't think that's a great solution, because remember, the government's really in a financial financial straitjacket, so to speak, today. We have a real dearth of financial resources coming in and a great demand on resources. So I don't think they're going to be expanding these programs, they're going to be cutting them. And unless you set up a trust for somebody who's disabled, as they cut back benefits, what quality of life is the person that you love and care about going to have? And of course, as you get older, you want to make sure you have these plans, because disability and how we die may be somewhat under our control,
right.
But the fact is we will die.
And sometimes these things happen very quickly and not as we would have imagined. Things happen.
Yeah, one of my two best friends died on August 14th of 2014.
So sorry.
And 21 days before his death, he went to the hospital because he had really bad arthritis, Bill. And Bill called me from the hospital and said, "Steve, I'm in the hospital. They're telling me I'm going to die. They're telling me I don't have arthritis, that I have cancer. It's in my bones, my heart, my lungs, everywhere." And so I actually had we have several attorneys in the office. Someone else took some clients for me. I went over, and we actually have some good connections in Boston. And I don't know why, but we made sure that we had the x-rays, the MRI, everything reviewed by someone in Boston. And they said, "I don't know how this man is still alive, but he will never make 3 months. And there's nothing you can do, and you shouldn't do any treatment." Unfortunately, his sister convinced him to do treatment, which was not in his best interest. But 21 days later, exactly to the day, he was dead. So we don't know what's going to happen.
Exactly. No, that is so sad. I'm so sorry to hear about your friend. Yeah. One of the things I know that people are really concerned about, as you said, is about protecting the assets. When people come to a nursing home, sometimes they're coming for short-term rehab, but other times they're coming for long-term care, and they're going to stay. So they may have some money, and they don't want to give it all to the nursing home, or they want to qualify for Medicaid. What could you, I know there's a lot, there's pages and pages about the Medicaid application process and all of that, but maybe you could just do a quick synopsis of it, of what somebody is looking at?
Sure. So Medicaid, we call it Mass Health in Massachusetts. The Mass Health application is approximately 34 pages long. There are all sorts of organizations that tell you, we'll help you fill out the Medicaid application. Well, anyone, I know it's 34 pages, but anyone can help you fill out the application. The question is, can they get you properly qualified? And if you want, can they protect the assets? So let's talk about what protecting the assets means. Okay. Who are we protecting them for, first of all? Right. Are we protecting them for the person? Are we protecting them for their spouse, a child who's helped take care of them, or somebody else? So the first thing I always look at is, how are we protecting them for the person? Because for a person to qualify for Mass Health, if they're going into a nursing home, they cannot have more than $2,000 in assets. Nor can they keep more than $72.80 a month. That's called a personal needs allowance. The rest of that goes to the nursing home. But life goes on, and we have lots of people. We have a lot of ALS clients, for example. They can go out, they can do things. Well, $72.80 a month does not go far. Right. So we can set up these very sophisticated trusts that take all of the excess funds, put them in a trust, so that the person has access to all of these resources. And that's a really wonderful thing. So if there's no spouse, no children or something, this is a great way to protect them for the person who's in the nursing home. Now, the government has a right to be repaid for what they paid the nursing home out of those trust assets. Now, as you may know, the government pays approximately 20% of what a person would pay when they pay for the nursing home. And so the government's bill is much lower. Okay. Now, the other thing is, what if there's a spouse? We have lots of people that they want to protect everything for their spouse. So let's use one example. So let's say a man goes into a nursing home. I always tell people men are the weaker sex. A lot of men don't realize that, but we are. And if a man goes into a nursing home, he may have all the wife. I'm going to flip this. Let's use a typical heterosexual relationship just for a moment. We have a lot of same-sex clients in our firm as well. If in a typical heterosexual relationship, the wife may have raised all of the kids, she might have worked 24/7, but she does not have a pension. And when they retired, the man, depending on when he retired, and even now there's a scam out there called pension maximization, and a lot of people fall prey to it. And that scam says, and it's perpetrated mostly by life insurance agents, unfortunately, it says, look, why not, when you retire, take the most amount of money that's available to you, leave nothing for your spouse. And what we'll do is take the difference between what you would have received if you left all the money for your spouse, and we'll buy a life insurance policy that will pay you far more and will be far more beneficial than the amount of money that the spouse would have received. And I'm trying to simplify it, but it's a little more complex than that. And so most people fall prey to this because now they're getting this big chunk of money. And the life insurance agents say, look, we'll buy this whole life policy, and after 6 or 7 years of payment, you will never have to pay another penny. The payments from the dividends of the policy will more than enough pay the premium, and now you can keep all that extra money. Well, here's what happens. That dividend never pays the premium. It's never sufficient. The person typically then forgets why they have the life insurance policy. Bills go up, things happen. They cancel it, and then the husband goes in the nursing home. Now, I'm getting back to that, long way around, but I'm back there. What happens if he dies and they spend down all of their assets, she gets nothing, and she's not going to have anything to live on. So what we can do is design a plan where that spouse, and it can be a same-sex spouse, I just used a typical heterosexual, that spouse, we can protect all of the assets for that person. And that way, they're not impoverished, they're not forced to leave their home. You know, while I'm talking about same-sex spouses, I do wish to tell your viewers, actually, that we became able to perform marriages in our office.
Oh, that's cool.
And the reason we did this is we typically had a number of senior women coming in. And one woman was in the early stages of dementia, and she might be going in the nursing home, but she had all the assets. And the only way you can protect them and transfer them to the other person if they're married. And so we'd perform the marriage for them. They were very uncomfortable going out and doing this very publicly and letting everybody know. For some reason, they've been living together 60 years, but they don't think anybody knew that they were a couple. But I used to think that was cute.
That makes my heart so full. That is a great story.
It's kind of funny, you know, and we signed up. We became ministers through this thing. I think it's called the Universal Life Church. I'm still very much a Catholic, but it doesn't require belief in any other entity. And then I filed some paperwork with the state, and we're able to do it. So it's kind of a fun thing because my concern in these cases many times is you'll have relatives that haven't talked with this couple for 30 or 40 or 50 years. Once they hear something's happening, they try to swoop in and take control. And if you're not married, they may be able to do that.
Right.
And so I tell people, God's about love and acceptance, you know. Get married. You love each other. Why not?
That's great.
So that's the long version of the story, but we can protect the assets, and we can also protect them for disabled children or a caregiver child who's lived in the house for at least 2 years and taking care of the person.
I just wanted to ask one thing too, is when there is a spouse in the community, they're married, they are able to keep the house. That's a lot of concern because people say, oh, someone's going into the nursing home, I'm not going to be able to keep the house, I'm going to have to sell the house. That is not true, correct?
Well, that's 99% correct. So if one spouse goes into the nursing home, up to approximately $850,000 of equity in the house, you can keep the house. Now, that doesn't mean you don't need to see a lawyer, and here's the reason why. Many people say, well, I could keep the house, and then one person's in the nursing home and they decide, I don't want the house anymore, I want to sell it. Well, if there are 2 names on the house or there's some other complications, they can't sell the house anymore. Okay. They're locked in and they are now prisoners in that house. So you have to be very careful about that. The other problem is if the person at home dies and they're both still on the deed, it now becomes the property in the nursing home and there's no way to pretty much protect it. It all goes. And families, you know, I don't like to think that it's the family's fault. I once saw a sign in a life insurance agent's office that said, people don't plan to fail, they fail to plan. Right. And so we should plan for these things. We should go out and find attorneys that know what they are doing. And those attorneys should, rather than just be scriveners and do what you ask them to do, should give you some advice and say, look, you should consider these kinds of things because globally you need to take care of all these other issues as well.
Absolutely. Well, that's good information because I know people get concerned about that. There's always a fear surrounding. We're in the nursing home business to help people, not hurt them and get their money taken away. So, is there anything new that we should know about? Anything new on the horizon that has come out? You just mentioned about this scam about the life insurance. I had never heard about that. That's great information.
It actually started in the 80s. It was called pension maximization. There was a lot of legislation and activity to make sure this didn't happen again. But you know, we're in a different environment now. There's a lot of lobbying efforts by these big financial companies to do away with all of these things. When the current president came into office, he undid some things that were consumer protection and were pro-consumer. For example, nursing homes, the former president, President Obama, signed some documents that basically prohibited nursing homes from having people sign binding arbitration agreements. This president did away with that. This president also did away with some restrictions on selling annuities into 401k accounts, things of that nature. So there's a real assault on consumers today. In terms of new things, there's a continuing assault on consumers. One of the new things that's happening is the Social Security Administration just came out with these new regulations that will require attorneys who work with people who are disabled to pass certain trusts and bills through the Social Security Administration to be sure that the Social Security Administration approves them in advance and approves the attorney's bills in advance. So previously you would have well-qualified attorneys representing people. If they structure this so that they cut the amount of money, and that's part of the goal. We actually have an administration that is not attorney-friendly and doesn't like lawsuits unless they're bringing them themselves, of course. And one of the things that will happen is if an attorney can only get some small amount of money for drafting these kinds of plans, you will drive the attorneys who know what they are doing out of the market, and you'll get substandard representation, and people won't receive the representation that they need. So people really need to be aware. And there's actually a further assault by some large continuing care retirement communities. There's a big push to push these arbitration agreements on people. And an arbitration agreement is dangerous because if somebody is negligent and kills your family member and you have signed an arbitration agreement, you may not even know you signed it. If you signed it and you had the authority to sign that agreement, you would never be able to bring a lawsuit against them. And you will not be able to get compensated for the horrible death and the negligence that person suffered. And we see more and more institutions doing that. So there's a lot happening right now.
There's a lot.
And I suspect that there will be a further, regardless, in the next year and a half before the next election. And I suspect if this president loses, we'll see a whole huge flurry of activity in the last several months to disenfranchise more people of their rights.
Well, that's a lot of great information. We're going to have to wrap up, so maybe give us the top 3 things that seniors should do.
Well, plan, and plan. You know, I get a lot of my wisdom from Marshalls and Home Goods, I tell people. We have a sign in our office, 3 signs, and I'm going to use it. One sign that says, a goal without a plan is just a wish. So you have to have a goal. The second sign says, if anything changes, change the plan, not the goal. So you need a goal to always be focused. You need a plan that's consistent with that goal. And never forget my favorite sign in the office and everybody else's favorite as well. And money isn't everything, but it keeps the kids close.
That is very good. Well, thank you so much for coming on the show and all of this valuable information. I know I really appreciate it, and I'm sure our viewers do too. So thank you so much for coming on.
Much.
And thank you. Please join us next time. Thanks for being here, and have a great day.